Bruce DuMont back, hour number 2 of Beyond the Beltway. Thank you very much for joining us. And in this hour, we are joined by Charlie Meyerson. He is a journalist, and he is with the Chicago Public Square News, and also Sean Thompson. He's a conservative talk show host on WIND 560 here in Chicago, one of our affiliates. And it's great to have you guys with us. I want to begin by picking up a subject that we briefly talked about at the end of the discussion. And Charlie, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to this first, since you are a journalist. How significant is it that the New York Post story was buried by Twitter and Facebook? Does the public have a right to know that story?
Oh, yeah, the public has a right to know that story was reported. The public also has a right to know that there are some serious questions about the provenance of the information, and I think that's been widely reported. Mm-hmm. I hope that answers your question.
Did they make a mistake then by, did they make it a bigger story by suppressing it?
Possibly. I want to preface, all of my remarks here, Bruce, by reminding you that as a journalist, I'm really more. Wait a second. I see you have me identified on screen as a liberal journalist.
Is that redundant?
That won't make a lot of sense to your radio listeners.
Isn't that redundant?
Let's back up a little bit.
Well, also, let me just mention, Charlie, we're on YouTube all over the world, so maybe you missed that in the memo.
I know that, but let's fix that. I'd like to reject that, and I'd prefer to be known as just a journalist.
Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to ask our engineer to see if he can obliterate the word liberal, and at the end of the hour, I'm going to take a vote to find out whether people think that was a mistake.
Let me explain. But first of all, a journalist's fundamental role is to question authority. And I see that as my primary mission here.
Okay.
And
we're going to see
as we live in a society where most of the authority at this point in the federal government lies on the right, any journalist who questions authority will be coming from the left.
Okay. Well, we'll let you defend that. And joining us on the right is someone who likes the word conservative. He's Sean Thompson. He's a talk show host on WIND, prime time, drive time every night. Sean, nice to have you with us.
I'm flattered you asked me to join. I really am.
Big fan. I listen to you regularly, and it's nice to have you on the broadcast. And we should also mention, by the way, that on election night, Sean and I will be, along with Mike Scott and Dan Proft, we will be doing election night coverage on AM 560 in Chicago. But my question to you is, in this New York Post story about Hunter Biden, yes, are you worried that this big story, alleged big story, comes out with maybe not enough time to really determine whether or not it's real or not?
It's funny, Bruce. This story actually broke 4 years ago in Peter Schweitzer's book. And he since has written a sequel to the book. It's a story that really didn't want, it seemed like it couldn't grab attention for its obvious nature. And, you come to believe, I was listening to the reporter argue about liberal, and I have to say, I think if you believe in the Constitution, you have to be a liberal. I actually consider myself a liberal. And what I mean by that is, regardless of party affiliation, we should believe in the rule of law, and we should believe in the principles that are America. I mean, that is something that 50 years ago, we could have our nuanced differences of policy, but we all understood that, there was one set of law. It was the American law. This is obvious. This case, to me, is obvious it's corruption. Does anybody out there think that Hunter Biden, who was thrown out of the military, who has no experience anywhere, should be involved in these international business dealings? I mean, there are investment firms that couldn't get these deals. I hold 7 SEC licenses. I couldn't get in a meeting with these people. Yet this kid, thrown out of the military with this scandalous past and really scandalous occupation, nobody still knows what he does, picks up contracts from America's enemies, for lack of a better term. In some cases they weren't, but for the most part, they're adversarial. If it's the Moscow wife, if it's the oligarch in Ukraine. Then you have China, 1.5 billion.
All right,
I don't care what party you're affiliated with. It's ridiculous.
Let's let Charlie wade in here as a journalist. Is there any part of that story or that description by Sean that you agree with or disagree with? Charlie.
It's not my role to agree or disagree. Let me back up just a second and salute Sean for recognizing the innate value in the word liberal, although, as I say, I don't portray myself as a liberal journalist. The word liberal, I think, is not a dirty word, should not be a dirty word, and I think Sean's done a nice job of acknowledging that. It's if you're going to start worrying about Hunter Biden and people close to Joe Biden, I think those who are concerned about that need also to ask questions about the people who are near and dear to President Trump. And the question becomes
do you
then,
not,
if you're worried about Hunter Biden,
do you not think
well,
that
how
those
many people again have been
Charlie,
convicted
do you not,
as part of the Trump campaign?
Do you wonder, Charlie, are you going to let me talk? Are you going to let me talk? Because if you're not going to let me talk,
I'm going to answer your question. Yes,
if you're not going to let me talk, you're not going to be on much longer. Okay. My question to you is this: do you believe that those people who've surrounded Donald Trump, who you rightfully have said deserve to have some questions about their actions, do you not think that there's been publicity about those? Hasn't there been enough coverage by the media to let the public know that these things exist? No one is saying that Donald Trump has surrounded himself with choir boys. But where's the balance here, Charlie?
I think you're asking a journalist. I think there's never enough coverage of anything or everything.
Oh, I like that.
You like that?
I like that. I like that. It has a lot of ambiguity in it. But Charlie, I think the one thing that we can agree with, I agree with you. Paul Manafort is a scoundrel. Roger Stone is a scoundrel. There's no question about it. They prostitute their influence for special favoritism. Fine. What we're talking here is he grabbed the stooge who happened to be the vice president's son and bought grace into the government. We're talking about our money, brother. This isn't about Republican and Democrat. Joe Biden wielded $1 billion as if it was his own, and he actually was a man and made it. He held it and extorted so that a country could remove a prosecutor who was investigating a company that is corrupt from the day it was founded, by the way. This is not about party stuff. This is about buying off the vice president of the United States of America.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were talking about the vice president.
Charlie.
I thought you were talking about the Trump campaign and the Trump company.
Charlie, you think this response
I get the equivocation game, but Trump was not into politics in that year.
Oh, but the corruption, that's been part of the picture all along.
Here's what you're doing, Charlie. You're equivocating corruption in the private sector with the public. And what you're not understanding is one could not exist if the public sector was not first and more corrupt. The private are just different players, Charlie. One day it's Trump, the next day it's not. The public is what needs to be cured and ripped out by the root.
When
you should be ashamed.
When we come back, we've got to pause. We've got to pause. When we come back, we'll also engage our guests here at home base in Evanston, Illinois. I'm Bruce DuMont. Don't go away. Bruce DuMont back. We continue with Beyond the Beltway. Thanks very much for joining us from coast to coast and border to border around the world at beyondthebeltway.com. Doug, we have not heard from you for a segment. Can you offer your opinion on how the mainstream media has covered Donald Trump? Because I'm sure that we will have different opinions from elsewhere on the broadcast tonight.
Well, I hate to. I'm not a whiner. I don't like to sound like a whiner, but I mean, this is. I mean, come on, it speaks for itself. This is the right, Republicans, conservatives, whatever, have always complained about, the bias in the media. We're way beyond that. We have been for the last 4 years or 5 years, really, when Trump got into this thing. We're not talking about bias anymore. We're talking about the vast majority of the media. I mean, with some notable exceptions, but a big chunk of the media, a big majority, is basically a wholly owned subsidiary of the Biden campaign. I mean, they are part and parcel. They are actively campaigning for him every single day, and they have been since the day he took office. And that's why we were just talking about that off air. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are not serious opponents. Both are unlikable. Both are slipping. Neither of them is a serious opponent.
In your opinion,
but the media is.
In your opinion.
In my opinion, but the media is, and that does concern me about this election. There's no question.
Are you worried about that, Dave? The appearance of impropriety on the part of media in the fairness and balance of this campaign covering it?
Well, the quick answer is yes. I think that there's an ongoing concern about fairness and objectivity in covering the events of the day, but I think we've seen an increasing polarization in all the media outlets. And by the way, the media, we use that word, it's not a monolith. There's the so-called, if you want to, the mainstream media, what we used to call the mainstream broadcast networks. But there is such a diversity of voices out there. I think that what we've seen, though, is you have outlets like Fox that are clearly the president's team, and you have the MSNBC, CNN, NBC, and a lot of these broadcasters, I have to say, even though they're reporting on things that I think merit, coverage, sometimes if you watch these programs, you see Anderson Cooper and you see Don Lemon and the other CNN anchors, and their contempt for the president literally oozes off the screen. I think we have to be candid and admit that. In the same way that the Fox hosts contempt for Biden or for
not
Barack
all
Obama,
of them, but not all of them.
Not all of them.
Let's go.
I think it's
back.
a problem.
I want to go to Charlie, and Charlie, give us your assessment of the specifically in the last couple of weeks, the debates over the debates over the town halls, the two dueling town halls that you probably watched this past week. Do you understand how those who are more conservative might believe that when you watch those two debates, it was a clear example of media ganging up on the president and throwing softballs to the vice president?
I'll answer that question in just a second, but I want to address one thing for you and Doug, and I'd like you guys to play along with me for a second. Can you guys repeat after me? Comma, C-O-M-M-A.
Kamala.
Yeah, Kamala.
I said.
Charlie, as an objective journalist, as you've alleged, why is it important for you to make that point, which is a Democrat talking point?
It's important for journalists to pronounce people's names correctly, to spell people's names correctly.
Do you spell their name correctly?
That you guys perceive yourselves as.
Have you ever corrected anyone else's?
Let's get it right.
But do you understand that's a trick, and that's an example of what I would describe as falling into the Democratic talking points and not being Why is that even an important issue?
It's a journalistic point.
Why is it important?
It's an attention to detail. It's an attention to accuracy.
Really?
Why don't you talk to your candidate, Joe Biden, because he constantly mispronounces it.
He's not my candidate. I'm a journalist. Now, to come back to your question about the debates.
Come on.
Let me just say that I believe the Commission on Presidential Debates is an entity whose time has passed and that they have woefully mishandled this whole process.
Well, I think we would agree on that.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Charlie, it's interesting, not too long
Sean, do you agree on that? I think we have agreement on that.
I mean, listen, I think it's obvious for everybody. You could tell by the posture in Savannah Guthrie's, just the way in which she was sitting in the chair and how she was seething. You can tell it.
Savannah's session was not part of the Commission on Presidential Debates. Those last two sessions this week were held independent of the commission. That's a separate issue. Those sessions were necessary because the commission flubbed it.
Yeah, I think we agree also that the commission flubbed it. But are you telling me that you didn't see in the first debate, which was hosted by Fox, you didn't see a contempt by Mike Wallace for Donald Trump?
No, I saw a reporter doing his job in a way that Chris Wallace consistently has not done consistently during the Trump administration. The point I want to make about journalism, by the way, and Bruce's question earlier about the media, what I see in the Trump administration is journalists doing their job in a way that, frankly, they didn't during the Obama administration, during the Bush administration. Journalists' job is to question authority. And yes, there's been lots and lots of questioning of authority in the Trump administration. There should have been just as much under Obama and under Bush, and I don't think there was.
And that, you know, what's interesting is that point, because I've yet to hear, aside from some obscure books and some facts about the Trump administration and their foreign policy of drone bombing. When I was a kid, all the Democrats and the so-called liberals of the time were very anti-war. However, when Barack Obama expanded bombing in 2 countries to 7, when the fact came out that 90% of the bombs he dropped killed innocent people, mums was the word. From the
on that, also I agree, which is again why I reject that label that was slapped on me at the start of the show, liberal journalist. Again, what I am is a journalist who questions authority.
Well, I hope
there's lots of authority on the right these days.
Well, and Sean, and let me just interject here that on the subject of Donald Trump's treatment by the media, I think there's no question that the media have been a very, very tough on Donald Trump, but he also declared open warfare on people who practice journalism. He has referred repeatedly to those in the news business as the enemies of the state, the enemies of the people.
Hold on a second.
That's when you denigrate the Fourth Estate and a free press and free inquiry, which is essential to our democratic republic. That is a problem.
Just David, are you serious right now?
Yes.
The enemy of the people knock that he did. First of all, he just didn't do that in a vacuum. He didn't start that. He didn't start that fire. That was in response to the constant lies about him, and that only applies to he said the fake news. And why wouldn't you agree that if you had, I'm going to use air quotes now when I say journalist, when journalists, quote unquote, push a fake narrative for 3 straight years with absolutely no evidence and tell the American people day after day after day that this president is a Russian agent. How can you not say that people who are doing that are the enemy of the people of the United States? That was so destructive to this country. How can you not agree? Are you like a Russian bot? That is absurd. How would you not agree?
Let him respond.
How can you not agree with the president?
Let's let him respond.
Doug, you're making gross generalizations about people who lobbed accusations at Donald Trump. No serious journalist, anyone who have referred to the president as a Russian agent, as a commentator, they have to defend those remarks. But the fact is,
which they have. You're not asking them to.
Listen, but here's my point. I started out working in newsrooms, and I understand what it means to be a journalist and a reporter, and what ethical news reporting is supposed to look like. The president, from the start of his administration, made it clear that he considered every single media outlet
wrong.
to be
That's wrong. You see, you get on your high horse about I was a journalist back in the last century or whatever the heck.
Is there?
You're on your high horse, but then right off the bat you're saying something that's not true.
Is there?
He has denigrated the practice of news.
Hold it, guys. I want to ask Sean this question. Is it possible that this Hunter Biden story from the New York Post, is it possible, because it has links to Rudy Giuliani, is it possible that this could be part of a Russian disinformation plan?
No.
Have you thought? I'm not asking you.
Rosemont Seneca is a company that was created primarily by Kerry's stepson Heinz, Devin Archer, and Hunter Biden. It was created to be a payoff scheme, a buffer and a bagman to their very influential fathers. I mean, and we could have all the arguments we want, but this is just the fact. These kids had no experience, none, in this kind of business. So let's just have that. That's a bipartisan issue. The other thing that I'm listening to the back and forth about the media, the unarguable point of the media is that 94% of them donate to one party. So what you do is you split the country right there, right? Because you understand the people who do not agree with that position of a very collectivist
but Sean, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this question, and I want your response, and then I want to get Charlie's response. It's been stated for quite some time and underscored by the FBI and our own intelligence agencies that the Russians are going to try to disrupt this campaign just as they tried to disrupt the campaign 4 years ago. And to some people, they succeeded. So if a story comes out with 10 days to go, that certainly I would describe as a bombshell story, when that story comes out, is there anything wrong with people who are on the receiving end of that story saying, I wonder if this is real or whether this is phony? Now I want to get your, we got a break. We got a break. I want to hear your answer and Charlie's answer and everybody's answer when we come back. Stand by. Bruce DuMont back. Thanks very much for joining us. Let's go back to Charlie Meyerson. The question that was asked, that I asked before the break is, when this story comes out, there are some people are going to suggest that it's part of a Russian operation. As a journalist, how do you track that down? How do you go about finding out whether or not it is, or it certainly could be, but how do you find out that it actually is?
You know, Bruce, I'm a journalist in the sense that I provide a daily account of journalism around the world, and I have no special insight. You know, I'm sitting here in Chicago watching the news as many human beings do, and trying to share what I consider to be insightful and authoritative accounts. And so the answer to your question is, I don't know. Let's see what real, authoritative, award-winning, respected journalists have to say about this over the next few weeks.
Do you feel that the other, or that CBS, NBC, CNN, do you think that they have been responsible or irresponsible by their lack of coverage of this story? Now, I asked you at the beginning about whether Twitter and Facebook, but what about the other major news operations? They seem to be they're off base. They're not covering this thing.
You know, there are certainly a lot of questions about the Post story and its provenance. But you know, I haven't watched all three networks. I'm not spending 24 hours glued to what other news organizations are doing. So I honestly can't answer that question. And I know it makes me a very unsatisfying guest for you, but I have no answer to that.
Sean, what's your answer to the question?
Well, I like Charlie. I think he's probably a wonderful guy. He seems like a very nice guy. But we're all from Chicago, right?
Yes.
How does Mike Madigan become the biggest mafia member for 50 years? How does he build an infrastructure of corruption that has literally destroyed a state?
Well, let's
usual cohorts. Well, the reason I bring that up is because why should we wait for reporters, respected reporters, to do their job? We ourselves owe it to ourselves to look at this information. I don't need anybody to tell me anything. I know how to read. We have in our hands a device that they could launch the space shuttle with. All the answers are at our fingertips. Every American should do their own due diligence and stop waiting for experts to tell them how to think.
Sean.
It's very obvious. This is a created shill company for bribery, Charlie. Come on. You're going to tell me Mike Madigan's a legit lawyer next?
I'm going to take issue with your question that we should all be able to read for ourselves. What are you reading, if not the work of journalists, reporters?
Rosemont Seneca is an investment
Keep repeating
company.
that. Okay, keep repeating that.
I'm going to repeat it till you know the name and it piques your curiosity. And you look at this company inhabited by nothing but heirs to power who have received contracts from China, from Ukraine, from Moscow. Aren't you interested in that, Charlie?
I certainly am, but you know what? Here's the deal.
Why don't you look it up a little bit, brother?
I am watching the story, as we all are. I think we're early in this cycle, and I'm not prepared to offer an opinion. But I do want to take issue with your statement that we don't need to wait for journalists, that we're all smart enough to figure this out on ourselves, on our own. We're nothing without people who are on the ground actually doing the hard work to figure out what's what.
Poppycock. What do you mean we're nothing without reporters? I don't need a reporter for anything, brother. I never did. And that's why your industry has the likability that makes Congress look popular. I'm sorry.
Where do you get your information, if not from the media?
Well, what do you mean? There's all kinds of aspects of information. I'm interested in companies. I'm interested in deals.
Well, and where do you learn about those companies? Where do you learn about those companies?
Well, there's numerous outlets that I would categorize. Sure.
outlets. Who works at those outlets?
Oh, well, it's not just liberal reporters,
Well, I
Charlie.
didn't say liberal reporters,
For
but are they
instance,
reporters?
you want to know where the bulk of my things come? Everything
Yes,
stems from money.
I would like to know that. I would like to know
Everything
that.
stems from money, Charlie. And I'm an old commodity trader. So I really scour, believe it or not, Bloomberg. I really
Oh,
scour
Bloomberg,
the
that's a
financial
journalistic
columns.
organization. Bloomberg is a journalistic organization.
You know what happens, Charlie? I read the little story, and then it piques my curiosity. And then I'll pull up a company or two that's in it, and I'll check what they're registered as, and I'll check what their business dealings are. Maybe I'm a better reporter than you.
Hey, Sean,
That's entirely possible, but it doesn't sound like it.
Sean, this is.
Dave Cohen.
I just wanted to interject one small point, which I think is worth mentioning, and that is that in this instance, when we're talking about the Hunter Biden story and the post work and whether or not and how that should be covered and so forth, the difficulty is we're talking about a story here, a scandalous story that's based upon digital information. And as Charlie mentioned, there's some question about where did it come from and is it authentic? Those are the kinds of questions that individual citizens don't have the resources to answer. We rely upon people wanting to be curious to know the truth. Is it true that these emails are authentic and that everything depicted and stated therein is true? I'm just saying that's what journalists do.
And in this story, we have another situation that smack dab in the middle of this story is the FBI. The FBI allegedly received a copy of Hunter Biden's computers. What are they doing with it?
A year ago. 1 year ago.
Yeah, what are they doing with it?
And the idea that the New York Post, I mean, talk about a credible organization. It's one of the oldest news organizations in the country, right? Founded by Alexander Hamilton, correct?
And owned by Rupert Murdoch.
And they did a very deep dig. If you actually read the story, did a very deep dig. We know where it came from. That's all backed up. Anyone go out and other people are talking to the repairman. That's all well documented. I just find it so funny that these so-called, again, I'm going to use air quotes, journalists are like, oh, we really have to do more research on this. Had no problem pushing a Russian collusion hoax for 3 straight years with absolutely no evidence. They had no problem pushing. Same way with Twitter and Facebook, had no problem allowing people to push this story that Donald Trump stood on the graves of soldiers and called them suckers and losers,
Doug,
even though there were 27 people.
I don't know if my microphone was on when I asked this question. I didn't hear you mention Rupert Murdoch's ownership of the New York Post, did you?
Why is that germane to you?
Rupert Murdoch owns Fox News. Fox News has a long and checkered history of playing fast and loose with the facts, as much as any news organization.
Is that the one outlet that's not owned by a Fabian socialist?
I'm sorry, Fabian?
Fabian socialist. Those are the people who believe themselves to be elitists.
The one outlet
are too stupid to control their own future, so they get these little cabals together and they control information.
He owns the Wall
society.
Also,
George
he
Orwell
owns
and
the
stuff. You never heard of that?
He also owns the Wall Street Journal. Where do you put that on your credibility list, Charlie?
Wall Street Journal, more credible than the New York Post, based on a long history of awards that it's won and award-winning reporting that continues to do.
And who gives awards, Charlie? Which
a number of organizations?
Which political persuasion gives awards?
The Pulitzer organization, journalism organizations. Yes, indeed.
Is there a conservative on any of their boards or their committees?
Yeah, and I know.
Who are they? Who are they?
I don't want to bring individuals in, but I know a number of journalists who have served in. I have a friend who has been the lead executive, elected official of a major journalism organization, and who is of a conservative bent.
This is to Doug. The extent to which Rudy Giuliani is involved in this story out of Delaware, the computer repair guy, does that send a signal to you that it's automatically correct? Or do you understand why people who are trying to find out whether this story is real, when they hear Rudy Giuliani's name associated with it, they automatically think something's up?
Oh, he's a distraction. He's a distraction. The repairman's father, I believe, contacted not Rudy Giuliani, but Giuliani's lawyer, right. I believe. Giuliani's a distraction. I mean, isn't it how far we've fallen? Rudy Giuliani, the America's mayor, Remember, after 9/11,
The lawyer who brought down the mob.
Not that long ago, but now anyone for these people, for Charlie or whoever, anyone, the garbage man who picks up, the garbage from the Trump Tower, or his barber, anyone in any way connected to Orange Hitler, these people are going to set their hair on fire and try to destroy them. I mean, the hate is out of control. I think that is what is going to save Donald Trump in the end in this election, is that enough decent Americans are going to see through the hate and are going to give him another 4 years.
Sean, do you think that the Hunter Biden story, does it sway any votes, or is it too late in the game? I mean, I said last week on this program, I don't care what happens in the next 2 weeks, whether it's left wing, right wing, wherever it comes from, disregard it, because there's not enough time to go into it to really find out whether it's real, whether it's not real, whether it's a Russian bot, a Chinese bot. We don't know, and don't be swayed by all of the shiny objects that are going to be thrown at voters. Is there some?
Not everybody is so polarized that they've lost their sense of right and wrong. I'm down in Florida. I'm going to confess to myself. And down in Florida, what's happened is there were commercials run by the Biden team that insinuated that Donald Trump would take away your Medicare and your Social Security. And he received a lot of blowback. The old people don't like the idea their free cheese is going to go away. So what they did is they said, okay, we're going to go for Biden. Well, the old people hate one thing worse than that, and that's a crook. Old people don't have tolerance for this kind of chicanery. This is a massive story. And it should have been out 4 years ago. To me, this is an old story. To everyone else, this is new. Right. This is very easily documented. And the other thing is, on the Giuliani, that's the lawyer that tore down the mob. That's why he became mayor. He was so trusted in New York. It was amazing what he won, the percentages he won the mayorship by. Yet all of a sudden now he's tainted. And the other thing is, the FBI could end it tomorrow. They've had it. They can validate it. Release the hard drive. You've had a year to work on it. What this also does is I have no faith, none, in the upper echelon of the FBI. In my neighborhood, they were called forever bothering Italians anyway. Now I have zero faith.
Okay, we got to pause. 1-800-723-8029. I'm Bruce DuMont. Back shortly with one more segment. Bruce DuMont back for our last segment, and before we go too much further, I want to let our Zoom guests take a moment to introduce themselves. And Charlie Meyerson, give us 10 seconds on who you are and what the Chicago Public Square News is all about. It's a free publication, correct?
It's a free daily email news briefing for people who are in or care about Chicago and the region and the state of Illinois, and you can sign up for free at chicagopublicsquare.com. And let me just say before we go any further, Bruce, I can't remember when I've enjoyed a broadcast like this.
Well, thank you very much. We've had a little tension everywhere. Sean, let's go to you. Tell everybody a little bit about your background. And we should mention, by the way, that based on the reaction we're getting on our Facebook page, you're picking up a lot of fans tonight, Sean. So tell people a little bit where they can
rare for me. This used to get me punched in the face in my neighborhood. Now people seem to like it. My wife is very confused by it. But I grew up in the neighborhood around Chicago, and I went to the Chicago Mercantile Exchange at 18 years old. I didn't have a pot to urinate in or a window to throw it out of, and I had to do one thing, and that's learn. So I focused on the economy, and you realize everything's about the money. These people that we both dislike for various reasons have abused our public trust, and I think it needs to stop. I think that's something we all need to agree on. And the nice thing is, in this day and age, we can always follow the money, and that's the real problem here. So.
And also, we should mention,
if I see John Boehner walking in Florida, I'm tackling him.
You used to be a caller on talk radio, and now you've got your own show.
Yes, I was working all the time. When I left the Mercantile Exchange, I heard two guys on the radio talking about something they knew nothing about, and it was oil. And those two people happened to be Dan Proft and Bruce Wolf, and I called in to correct them. And they asked me to call in the next day, and the next thing I know, I have a show. And I'm doing 5 to 7 on AM 560, The Answer. I'm filling in for Steve Cortez.
And Steve will be back. Steve Cortez, who has left Salem and WIND, he's gone to work at the White House, and the plan is that he will eventually come back when the campaign is over?
Unless I run him over with my car, yes.
Anyway, you're picking up lots of fans tonight, and again, I hope we pick up some listeners and some users of the Chicago Public Square news as well. Let's go to. We do have a caller that's been waiting a long time, Bonnie in Crown Point, Indiana. Go ahead, Bonnie. You're on the air. I guess Bonnie is not there. How about Johnny in El Paso, Texas, listening to us on KTSM? Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to respond to your last segment about Trump's support for the African Americans.
Okay,
I'm an African American, and I want to take politics out of it, but he has definitely offended me for a couple of reasons. I'm also a 20-year veteran. I served from 1963 to 1983.
Thank you.
And, 20 years. I retired 37 years ago. I'm in my 70s. So I'm very offended when I hear him say what he said about us, suckers and losers. Offended to see him speak over John Kelly's son's grave, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That really, really offends me, and I don't like it. Secondly, I don't like how he has these rallies and have these people. I'm not even talking about what the politics are in that audience, but I'm looking at those poor people out there shoulder to shoulder, risking catching the COVID-19. I myself, when I leave the house, I leave the house religiously with my mask on, and sometimes my rubber gloves, depends on where I'm going to go. And I'm quite sure there are millions of people who think like me. So there are a lot of veterans here in El Paso. That's what caused me to be here. I retired here, like I said, in 1983 at Fort Bliss, and a lot of veterans here, and we are very offended about this. It had nothing to do with race. It's just how he talks about us veterans. That's my point. That's how I feel about it.
Let's let Doug respond to that.
Well,
This is the Atlantic article you're referring to.
Sir, thanks for your service, first of all. But I would say that I think you're just misinformed about Donald Trump, and if you actually really do some more Googling research on that, you'll find that there's actually no support. All the evidence says that Trump never said that. All the evidence says Trump never says that. There was one article
Which evidence are you talking about?
About the suckers and losers. There was an article by a Trump-hating dying magazine that had no sources, anonymous sources, named no one who could actually would stand by that. Meanwhile, sir, there's 27 people on the record who were on that trip and were with Trump say it never happened. And I think if you step back and really look at the president's record on the military and our veterans, he loves our veterans, and he loves you too. And I really hope you'll, maybe you've already voted, but I really hope you'll give him another look, because Donald Trump calls fake news the enemy of the people, and that's why, because a good person like yourself, I'm sorry, with all due respect, I would say you've been bamboozled here by bad people.
Dave, your response?
Well, I think it's unfortunate this president has a track record of offending constituencies that he should care about, and I have to say that regarding the military, if you look at the way that he went after a decorated and distinguished POW like John McCain, and then had the poor taste to trample on his grave by continuing to denigrate him after he passed away. I mean, that is the kind of message that the president has sent to the military community about his regard for those who served.
Didn't John McCain get the last laugh on the president?
Got it on us.
On his grave, but I mean, he got the last word, right?
Well, you mean in terms of the repeal of Obamacare vote?
Yeah, I'm talking about a lot of things.
You're talking to Trump. He lied to it. John McCain lied to the American people. John McCain promised when he was running that he would vote to repeal it. He lied to the American people.
A quick answer from everyone. Charlie, I need a one word answer, or pretty quickly. Do you think we've got a landslide before us, for or against Donald Trump? Is the word landslide involved at all? Yes or no?
I make no predictions.
Okay.
Not since 2016.
Okay, let's go to Sean Thompson. Is landslide...
He will shock it the way he did in 2016. It'll be the same result and the same phony outrage.
Okay, Dave Cohen.
No landslide in my forecast, but I do foresee a Biden victory.
And Doug.
Trump does win. Yes.
But
yes.
you don't use the word landslide.
I'll use landslide.
Okay. We've got 2 more weeks to wrap it up here for Campaign 2020. We've got a great panel next week, and also on November 1st, I'm Bruce DuMont. Good night from Evanston, Illinois.